There it is, night school set. Is this not exciting? We are going to learn how to pick open some locks. So what comes in here? First you get a handful of very nice picks with thermal handles on them to keep them nice and comfy. You get a mix of different tension wrenches. And then, of course, the best part, you get a number of different cut-away locks with that beautiful little window in there. So let's get the case out of the way and go over it. So, picks. Go ahead and take a look at what you got there, and you'll notice that you have a number of different shapes. They're all different, they're all important, but you're going to have some that are hooks, and this one in particular, we call that one the short hook. Some that come to a little bit of a diamond end. This one's called an offset hybrid. And then some that are a little bit more wiggly with bumps at the end. And these are designed for raking. We call this a twin. There is a version that's called the city. And there is a version that is called the triple. There's more than these, but these are the ones that come with your set. And these are valuable. All of these picks are valuable. So what do we do? First off, let's take a look at one of these locks here. So inside the lock, well, first off, let's get this thing open. So if you haven't figured it out already, this is actually the key. The head looks a little bit differently, but if you line it up, you get the keyhole straight up, you pull it out, there you go, there is your key. This is the end that you're going to pick. Don't be confused by that side, okay? Just pretend for now that side doesn't exist. This is where we're focused at. That is our key, and if we look through that little window that's milled in there, as we push that key in, you can actually see the pins that are rising and falling inside of the lock quite nicely. And when the key is in all the way, we can turn it. Well, guess what? We've got to do the exact same thing, but now we've got to do it with lock picks. And we've got to lift those pins individually, get them to sit in a nice position, and once they're all properly lifted to that position, the lock turns open. What allows that to happen? Well, in locks, there tends to be some intolerances that allow us to manipulate the pins to what we call the shear line. So, what is the shear line? In the lock, you've got two pins. Look at this. We're going to get a visual aid in here. You have a bottom pin that sits here. That's representing the bottom pin. And you have a top pin. Those are the ones that you can see in your window. That is your top pin there. And then you have the core, and that's the big plug that all of this moves in and out of. Now, when that top pin sits between what is called the shell, or some people might call it the Bible, and the core of the lock, it prevents the core from turning. And you can see that here. So there's our top pin. It is blocking it. But when you lift that bottom pin to the right level, all of a sudden, now you can actually freely turn it. So that is what we have to do. With our lock picks, just as the key does, we have to lift those top pins to sit on what is that shear line. And that shear line on this is going to be that same top there of that half circle. So let's get one of these locked up, and then we're going to take a closer look at how to pick this open. And the one that you want to look for is the standard. This is the standard pin lock. And if you look closely, each of the pins is shaped like a little tube. The other ones that come with this one, let's take a look. These ones are serrated. And if you look at the bottom of them, you see how they have little cuts and grooves. That makes it a serrated lock. And then the third one, this will be spool. And if you look, I tend to call them Roman columns. If you look at how they're shaped, they're skinny in the middle and wider at the top. And these two variations, the spool and serrated, are security pins. And they just make life a little bit more difficult. We'll go over that next. Okay, so we've got our standard lock selected. Go ahead and pull the key out. Remember, when you look at it, get that little keyhole head, and you know once that's lined straight up, key will pull out. And let's go through the tension wrenches. You get kind of two sets. You get this Z-bar style, and then you get ones with the half flex. go ahead and pick the widest half flex one. And if you compare them all, you'll see they're different widths. We want the widest one for these locks. And locks all have, you know, fairly different keyways. And what you really do want to do is find one that fits fairly snugly, but also gives you room to work your pick through the lock. So we're going to take our standard lock, we're putting it on the right side, we have our tension wrench goes in, and then we're going to select a pick to go at this with. We are going to start with what is called a single pin picking, which is lifting one pin at a time. The other technique we're going to go over is raking. So the tools that we have for single pin picking, you have a few here. You can choose the short hook. You can go with a half diamond, or you can go with the offset hybrid. For this, I am going to go with the short hook. You can do whatever you like. This is your set, you choose, but let's try a short hook and work at this a little bit. So how do you hold this? I'm going to show you two ways. When you're normally picking open a lock and you've got a padlock in your hand, get it deep into the crux of your hand and get that index finger slightly over, putting a little bit of pressure on there. So look, I've got it deep in the hand, index finger comes over, and you're doing this. You pick up a lock, you throw a tension wrench in like that, someone will look at it, looks like you know what you're doing. You're holding it properly. This case, because it has the window, if you want to see the window, you're going to hold it slightly different, index finger on top, thumb on the bottom, and you're going to tension with the other fingers there. I'll give you guys a second to take a look at what we're doing here. Tension like that, and make sure that wrench is sitting right in the bottom of the keyway. If it's sitting middle or too high, it's going to interfere with the pick that you've got to get in there and do some work. So tension wrench at the bottom, and you're applying light tension. How much tension do you put down? Think of it about half of what it takes to push down a key on a keyboard. If you put too much tension on this, and it can happen, you start getting frustrated, you're a little angry with trying to pick it open, and you think, I'm just going to bend that thing and break it open. It's not going to happen. More tension is going to give you poorer results. Almost always, if it's not working for you, lighter tension is better than heavier tension. So let's clear this out and get to work. Now, you've got 5 pins that you can see there. We are just going to start slowly working our pick through the lock, nudging those pins up, and what we're feeling for is we're feeling for it to sit on that lip of the shear line. Now when you go through, you're going to find some are very soft and springy, and then you're going to find some that have more resistance when you're lifting them. Those are the ones that we want to go after. Now they could be in any position because every lock's going to be a little bit different. So it could be the front pin, it could be a middle, it could be a back. But with that said, I always like to start at the back and just slowly work my way forward. You want to start at the front, work your way to the back of the lock, that's fine. But what you're feeling for is you're feeling for that resistance. So I'm going to go to the back of the lock, and there I had a very nice click, and I can see that that pin, because if I look through that window, you can see that back pin is now sitting on that lip. You can see this one is sitting a little high. That's what we call overset. So we're going to just light tension, and now I'll get the pick back in there, and we'll just start feeling through as to where these pins want to sit. And all I'm feeling for is a little bit of resistance, and the one that resists is the one that needs to be lifted up into place. And when you have them, the lock will just open up. So let's see what's going on here. I can actually see what one of my problems is. And this is why every once in a while you've got to let go of the tension and come back. If you look at that middle pin, remember I said overset? Let's see how that bottom pin has come above the shear line. So we're just going to release tension and start again. And that's a good habit to get into, that you're going to be picking at it. If it's not going your way, just take a little bit of a pause, release that tension, and well, that time it went our way fairly quickly, and there you go, and it will turn open. And that is a standard pin lock successfully picked open. Just remember, if I can give you any bit of advice, go easy on the tension. Light tension is critical. So now it's reset, everything is dropped back into place, and you can go at it again. So just a quick review, small motions. Think of how tiny these pins are. You are not flicking these things up. The other thing is, it's a lifting motion with the pick. It's not a turning motion. The number of times I see someone stick it in and think that it's a key and you go back and forth like this, that's not the action. Just slowly lifting pins. Look at the spacing on them. These things are not far away, and you can look. That's the depth of the last pin. If you've got this thing buried in there and it's coming out the back, clearly we're doing something wrong. So we want to find the position, lift up, come back, lift up, and do it with purpose. Don't go random. Really try and feel what is happening inside the lock. Get what we call feedback from the lock. You can sometimes feel it in your fingers, you can feel it through the shell, and you really will feel this click as that pin sets into place. So that's a little bit of an overview on how to pick a standard lock. Let's move on to something different. Okay, so we've gone over the standard. So now we're going to talk about security pins. So this one here in my hands is full of spool pins. And spool pins, what is neat about them is that when they start out, because they're wide, they want to go straight up. But then when they get to a certain point, they actually want to kick sideways in the lock. And you get the feeling that you've probably now felt picking that standard lock, and you think, oh, I've set it. But you haven't. You have what is now called false set. So yes, you set it, but you set it in the wrong position. So what does that look like? I'll bring out this handy little device again. So that is a standard pin. I hope that comes through. This is a spool pin. And just look at what happens that you have lifted it only part way, but look at how now the keyway can actually twist. And if you look, it actually jams into position there. So it gives the feeling that it's opening, but what it's actually done is wedged itself in a position that makes it even that much harder to pick open. And when you get into that position, what you actually have to do is lower the tension to get things to line back up, put your pick back under, and get it back into proper position. Now, most locks that will have a spool or even any security pin might have one, maybe two in there. That makes this one a whole lot more challenging because you have 5. So this is a little bit of a challenge, but you also have a window to look in and see what's going on. So you're going to go through the same motions you did before. Take a good sized tension wrench, put it in. Light tension. Hold the lock how you feel most comfortable. You want to go traditional proper, like so. If you want to look at that window, you're going to hold it like this. We're still single pin picking, so you can take an offset hybrid, short, whatever you like, and the motion is the same. But what you want to look out for is that feeling that you are lifting it part way and that it's sticking. So the picking is exactly the same. It's just a slightly different feeling. Go through the lock, lift a little bit higher so that you make sure that you have that pin all the way to the top. Slowly lower it down, and now you're going to be successful in trying to pick spool pins. Just for speed, I want to help get you guys now set up for the other one, serrated pins. Now I don't have a little display of what these look like, but it's quite easy to see. They have little cuts, and those little cuts are just nasty little ways of catching on the edge of the shear line as it's going up. This can really be a feeling of going one step forward, two steps back at a time, because you'll feel it click into place. And a lot of times you'll hear someone say it crunches into place. So, same idea. Tension wrench goes in, choose the pick that you've become most comfortable with, go at it, but don't be surprised that as you are lifting, compared to a standard pin, when you lift that up, you just have this smooth resistance. With serrated, you're going to get a little bit of a crunching feeling as it's going up. That's a telltale sign that you have a serrated pin inside a lock, to focus on it and lift it. But again, the principles that you've learned so far with standard applies. You're lifting that pin to the shear line, moving to the next pin that has the most resistance, lift it up, pick the lock open, and be successful with it. So we've gone over single pin picking. Let's take a look at something different, because you have more tools in here and more skills to learn. We're going to go over raking. Okay, raking. So there is a variety of rakes. You can see them there. We have got the city rake, also sometimes called an L rake. We've got the triple. You've got snake rake, also known as Best Buster. Best is a brand of lock. And the twin, it's like the triple, but guess what? There's only 2 bumps. Monstrous picks, those are all good. So how does this work? You're really just rapidly moving the pick through the lock in a back and forth motion. That is scrubbing the bottom pins, making the top pins jump, and magically opening up the lock. And that is called raking. Now, it's called raking, it's not called sawing. So don't just jam this thing all over the place. Really don't twist it. You're just going to wreck your tools. So take your standard lock and let's give this a try. Again, light tension is the key. That is probably more important with raking than anything else. Light tension. This one I'm going to use a twin. Get a comfortable grip. Light tension. Go to the back of the lock. Doesn't help if you're only working the front of it. And rip forward. And you're really just trying to skip along the bottom of those pins and get that sucker to open. It's not going to open every time. Just put a little bit of effort into it. And I think that's something that you should give a try right now. Go ahead and pull that set out. Grab your picks. Grab your tension wrench. Grab a lock. Start single pin picking. Start raking. Do whatever you like to do. And I just want to thank you for joining us on this journey and picking up the Night School set by Sparrows.